All right, today is Monday, March 18th, 2019, and this is the Kubernetes CSI implementation meeting. Let's just jump right into our agenda. So PRs that need attention. We have this, which is, I think this is adding the ephemeral support to host path. Okay, so I think, Vlad, you are looking at this, right?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I'll be looking at it. Part of it is some of the code I submitted to Kevin, so I'll be looking at it.
Okay, sounds good. So this is on your radar. I don't think we need to track it here anymore. Next up is this. What is this one? Cache driver capabilities. Okay, this is something that I have on my backlog to review. So I think
maybe we can discuss it here.
Okay.
What should happen if driver doesn't support what should happen if the driver doesn't support create and read volume? Should the provisioner die or exit at startup with some error, or should it run and send events to PVCs that it won't provision anything?
Like, I kind of feel like if a driver doesn't support provisioning, they shouldn't even run the sidecar.
Yeah, we run all the other sidecars because if the driver doesn't support attach, it marks volume attachment as attached. If it doesn't support controller resize, it marks the resize as done, and so on and so on.
Yeah, but I think provisioning is a little different because it needs, like I think for skipping attach makes sense because we need a way to bypass it. Otherwise, you can't even access your volume. For provisioning, like, since there isn't actually a volume that exists, the only benefit you get from running the provisioner is a nice message.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much it's worth it to run the provisioner just to print out a nice message, because the external provisioner is going to take up memory and it's going to take up, connections to watch all the API objects.
Where do PVs come from in the situation when the driver doesn't do provisioning?
It comes.
Is it expected that for those drivers there's just a way that PVs get created out of scope, like some admin initiated action?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. If the assumption is the admin is going around creating all the PVs, there's not a lot of point in having a sidecar. I get it.
Yeah, but there's one issue I ran into when I was updating the host path is that if you don't run the controller at all, at some point, either the registration and either the registrar or something asks for a capability. So you have to be able to return those capabilities. So if we kill the sidecar altogether, that call will die and start throwing errors all over the place.
I'm not sure that's the same issue.
Okay.
Like, I don't think not running the provisioner will cause get driver capabilities to start failing.
It should work. Kubernetes will just restart the container once and then from time to time. Not sure how often. Okay, so this PR exits when the provisioner is not needed. So that's the only open issue in the PR, I think.
Okay, let's see. So if your driver doesn't support provisioning, you should either not run the sidecar at all, or run the sidecar so you can get a nice error message. Otherwise, I don't see a point for a driver to run the sidecar only to have the sidecar exit and potentially be restarted all the time.
Well, it should tell the admin that something is wrong, and the admin should see that's not necessary.
Okay, so if we change that behavior, then we will not be able to support displaying a nice error message. Is that right?
Yes.
So basically we're just saying, with this change, we're basically just saying, don't run the sidecar if you don't support provisioning.
Yes.
That seems okay with me. We probably just need to have it in the release notes because this would be a breaking change.
Okay.
Does anyone else see any issues, or does anyone else see much value in having a nicer error message?
What is the alternative? What is the not nice error message? Isn't it just?
I think the error, so if you don't run the provisioner and someone tries to create a PVC for the driver, the error message you get is waiting for external provisioner blah 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 to provision a volume.
Yeah. And then of course it never happens, so it just sits there.
Yeah. The alternative is the error message you get is this driver does not support provisioning.
Yeah, and because it's up to the admin to decide what gets installed and what the storage classes are, the user wouldn't know the difference. So it is kind of crappy if the user has to find out just by waiting and nothing ever happens.
Yeah, I mean, so the other alternative is documentation. So I think Saad wants to revamp the whole drivers table in our CSI docs to basically have columns for all the features. And so for every single driver, you can have a check mark whether or not that driver supports provisioning, does it support resizing, and a bunch of other stuff.
Okay, there's something that's kind of swirling in my head. What if we, and that might be way too much for this, but what if we delegate the provisioning down to the internal CSI kubelet like we do for all other drivers, and then take control there and kind of control what the messaging is?
You mean like do provisioning in kubelet?
Well, the provisioning would still happen externally because you would push out the PVC, I believe. But at that point, you would have more control, and if I guess you can query the driver there. If it doesn't support what we're looking for, we could kill that call, I guess.
So the other alternative is we could potentially register all the capabilities in the CSI driver object.
And then for provisioner types that can't provision, something would react to those PVCs and say, hey, you're never going to get a PV.
Yeah. So if, say, like the cluster driver registrar queries all the capabilities, then it stores it all in the CSI driver object. Then in the external provisioner, you can go check the CSI driver object to see if the driver even supports that capability.
I can.
Yeah, but there
shoot
is
the
no
driver
internal
itself.
provisioner in the.
No, I mean the PV controller, the internal.
Yeah, okay. That would work. And that could work. But that's something for 115, I guess.
Yes. I think that's fine. It's really just making the message nicer. So I'm okay with this going in now. And we just have to have a release note saying that if you don't support provisioning, then don't run this sidecar.
Wait. Now we have the message. With the PR, we'll lose the message and we are going to restore it in 115. That looks very odd.
Okay.
So I would change the PR to printer message. It's just one if at the right place. And put it into the controller in 115.
Okay. So you're saying for this PR we should not exit.
Restore the message.
Restore the message. You would have to not exit.
Send an event when to PVCs when driver doesn't support create delete volume.
Sorry, I missed what you were saying.
Are we losing?
Hello? Sorry, can you repeat what you were saying, Jan? Are you there?
I think we lost him.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello? Hi. Are you there?
He must have turned his sound off.
Okay. I think the conclusion is keep current error, nice error message, which maybe means don't exit. And for 115, we can add capabilities to the CSI driver object so that the PV controller can display the nice message.
Sorry, I got dropped.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
All right. So I think correct me if I'm mistaken, but the conclusion is that we should keep the nice error message, which means that we shouldn't exit the sidecar.
Yes.
And then for 115, we can look into moving that message to the PV controller through using the CSI driver object.
Yes, it looks correct.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so I'll fix it.
Sounds good. All right. Next up is release tools. Is this adding the prow.sh to the release tools?
This one is the start of that whole process. It's the common code that needs to be imported into the other repositories. So that's basically the shared shell script that then ends up being used by the individual components to do the prow testing. Yes, so it's
Okay.
basically the starting point.
Cool. I
And
will
yeah.
go ahead and take a look at that.
I think I've linked to, in that pull request, I've linked to 2 components where I'm currently using that script. And there are prow jobs that have been run or have been executed with that code. So there are some proof points that it does something useful, I hope. and you can have a look at the prow output, for example, to see whether it's what you were expecting.
Okay, awesome, excellent, thank you. All right, next up on the agenda, vanity URLs. So I guess my question for you guys is, should we switch over to using vanity URLs now, or should we just do it next release?
Switch where?
Which is vanity?
This is like, I guess it would be something like,
Is it like the Kates.io or something like that?
yeah, like,
Exactly.
Could it be
Like
CSI?
.csi.
Or,
yeah, using something like that instead of github.com. I think is that right? Yeah.
Switching in the code in the package import paths.
This is like changing it in all the codes that have to import the packages.
that's a lot of projects that need to be updated.
It is.
Does this vanity URL already work?
I don't think it does. So I think it's also going to require support from the release team to set this up, to set up the DNS redirection and all that.
I would say we do that next release.
Yeah.
Okay.
Until that actually works, there's nothing to talk about.
Okay. All right, and next topic I wanted to bring up on release notes for our sidecars. Right now we are just putting all the commits and listing out all the commits and stuff in the actual release, the GitHub release message. I'm wondering if we should follow the style of Kubernetes more and actually have a changelog file in the repository itself. And then in the release notes, you would actually just point to the changelog.
How does that changelog get generated? Is it when you submit a patch, you change it, or how?
So right now, are you asking in Kubernetes or in
Kubernetes?
So in Kubernetes, whenever you create a PR, there is like a section for a release note, and then there is a tool that goes and generates the release notes based off of those sections. And then you can go ahead and like edit the MD file as needed to, fix up the notes and that kind of stuff before you actually merge it.
Okay.
We don't have all of that set up on our sidecars. So I think as a first step, if we wanted to do this, it would be kind of manual. Like every time you submit a PR that needs a release note, you also append it to the changelog file. Does anyone have preferences?
But that's one changelog per component, right?
Yes, per repository.
Yeah, then I don't see the big advantage over that I don't see how it addresses the first bullet point. You still need to go through each individual GitHub repository to get a full picture of what has changed since some time.
So the main thing is that it's easier. So, okay, let me try to pull up something.
Yeah, I see how it can be more readable than a Git log or a list of commits which is what we have at the moment. I'm just wondering whether we should go one step further and have one changelog, for example, on the docs side, where we collect that information for all of the different components in one place.
I think then that's hard to make sure that is added every time because they're all in different repos, right? Every time you make a PR
Yeah,
in one repo, then you have to say you go another repo and there is a delay. I'm just saying, is it better to have them together?
So okay, to kind of illustrate what I mean. So right now, all the commits are just listed directly in this release note, and so say I'm on driver 0.4, and I want to see what are all the changes that went into 0.4. In order to figure it out, I have to look here at 0.42, look at the changes. Then I have to go find 0.41. I have to skip over 1.0, and then I have to go find the next. Oh, here's 4.1. Here's all of these changes. And by the way, like these changes are not in the same format as 0.42. And then to look for 0.40, I have to go and scroll down and search here and find a 0.40, which I don't even see one. So I think if we had like a changelog file, like changelog -0.4, and then it just listed the whole history in one place, that would be easier to see all the changes that have gone into that release branch, instead of trying to like jump around this page right here.
Why would the if a changelog file is inside the repository, why would it have a version number?
So it could be for each minor release, we can keep a separate changelog. So if you see the way that Kubernetes does stuff.
But it would be on the individual release branches, not on master.
Well, I mean, yeah, it would
okay.
be like here in Kubernetes, it's on master, but they usually update this before they branch.
Yeah, but where's the latest copy of that file for 1.14? It's in the release 1.14 branch, right?
Yes, it should be, although it looks like even here, so I'm looking off of master, and it looks like it might be periodically syncing it or something.
No, yeah, well, go to 1.13 perhaps, and we'll see whether it actually has the latest entry. It does. So yeah, there must be some additional work going on here.
Yeah, so it must be updating it here and updating it in the release branches, maybe.
I see how that would be useful, but I personally would prefer that in as we see here with Kubernetes, we need some additional tooling to make that additional commit in one central place. So I actually would do that on the docs side.
Mm-hmm.
And the tooling how to do that, of course, is an open problem, but I think that would be more useful for users.
Okay, so, well, do you think even before we have tooling, would it make sense to at least try to move towards this model manually?
I think it would make sense to be more diligent about the commit messages or the pull request message and have some standardized comment field for release notes. I think that would be useful.
So you want to, so we should standardize on release note format.
We should just, I think we should just do what Kubernetes does, and that is this comment section or verbatim section in the pull request message. I think we then also need to ensure that the pull request message gets committed. I think currently that is the case for Kubernetes, but it's not the case for our repositories. There must be some config setting in Tide or whatever merges the pull requests that does that. Because I think I've seen that done differently. I can also try to check that.
It should all be the same now, right? Because here it says merge pull. The same bot is merging stuff.
Yeah, you're right. It just says merge pull request. I guess the tooling then must go to that pull request page on GitHub and pull out the command.
Yes. I think
Yeah,
it probably
yeah,
pulled
yeah,
out.
okay.
So at least until we have that tooling in place, this is kind of, it would have to be manual.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. What we can change is the configuration setting that says that this changelog entry must be set.
What entry must be set?
In Kubernetes, in your pull request, you must have changelog none explicitly said if it doesn't have a changelog. So it forces people to think whether they have a changelog entry or not. And I think that's something that we might want to enable now for Kubernetes CSI.
Okay. Well, at least for, so for this next release, which we kind of want to get out the door in the next 2 weeks or so, I'm not sure if we're going to have time to go and enable anything by default. So I guess the question here is that for this upcoming release, do we want to try to move towards this model, or should we just wait until the following release when we put into place better tooling and processes?
I guess it's fine to just say that we do it, not change the config in Prow or in Tide, and just say that, or communicate that we want to switch to that.
Okay. Okay, so let's start doing this for, let's start doing this for this release. We'll start, all right. We'll start looking into better processes for 115 then. All right. Okay, next topic, Jan.
Found it. So now we have a table with version and features in README of each sidecar and again in the docs. And I would prefer to have one table instead of two, so it's easier to release new version.
So the main challenge we have is if we put it in the repository, we have a slight chicken and egg with the image version. Because we need to update this README with an image version that doesn't exist quite yet. So one possibility is that instead of actually putting a real, like, official release, we put down some canary version.
Why do we need the table at all here if the same table is in docs?
It might be useful to just keep up to date, right? Because if someone comes and looks at this sidecar repository, like, there will be nothing here saying, giving any hint as to what minimum Kubernetes version is supported or what CSI spec version is supported.
I can link to the documentation.
You're saying that we should just have, you're saying that we should just push it, or sorry, instead of documenting it here, make people just look at the compatibility through the CSI docs.
Yeah. Well, the goal I want to have is to have one table. Yeah, I don't really care where it is, but it should be one and up to date.
I think we can consider that. The main challenge is also keeping it up to date.
Yeah, and then the question becomes, if master changes compatibility at some point, how do you represent that in the docs? So the CSI docs would say, master branch is compatible with release.
Well,
I don't know.
okay.
We've had that break in the current history at some point, and then we would need an entry in the CSI docs that says master before that commit is compatible with 113, master after that is compatible with 114, and
Yeah,
that would be just awkward.
So I don't think CSI docs should say anything about master branch. It should only contain information about stuff that we've officially released.
And then we need the information about master inside the component itself, where it can be kept up to date as we make breaking changes.
So basically, keep it as it is.
Yeah, perhaps remove the version, the container image.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we can like maybe container image. You can say canary or just remove it altogether.
Canary would work because that's always rebuilt for master. So if you look at the master branch, that's what you get. It's kind of, well, even that is a bit odd, because then if we do branching, or just then we need to change the content itself inside the repository, which was one of the things that we wanted to avoid in the past. So I would just take out the container image.
Okay.
Or the version, and leave it up for detailed information about which version to use. People should consult the CSI docs.
Okay, so the README will contain just information about head of the branch, and the CSI docs will contain the released versions.
That makes sense to me.
Well, the release manager job becomes very complicated now, because he needs to make the release notes, copy the versions to the right places, and all the other stuff I don't remember.
Yeah, I think definitely we need to work on having like a standardized release process so that we remember all of these steps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Next topic is compatibility.
Yeah, so we changed CSI driver and CSI node info between 113 and 114. So should our sidecars support both or just one?
Yeah, I brought this up with Jan this morning on Slack, because I kept thinking about the changes that I was seeing going into the README, where we basically document that the current or the next release will only be compatible with 114, and then I started thinking what that means for 113 and how we support that. My conclusion kind of was, for me at least, that it will be easier to have one code base that supports 113 and 114 than having two forks of a code base that just differ in how they handle these objects.
That kind of makes sense to me, especially when we go from beta to GA. Like, we will definitely need to support both objects. An argument could be made that because the CRDs are alpha, we technically don't need to support it, and we can make breaking changes.
Yeah, but that then means that anyone trying to use 113 with features that depend on CRD are now screwed, because those features are no longer supported.
Yes, I mean, but those are also alpha features, right?
Yes, but I still don't like that particular approach. If there is an alternative, I understand that technically there's no guarantee that it's actually supported, but I still would make the case that we should try, and I'm willing to take the burden here and create the necessary patches for restoring the CRD support in those components that need it.
Okay. My main concern is, let's say in the future, like, I think even we have this issue today with the leader election work that we're thinking of, right? If we want to support the lease leader election mechanism, that requires a minimum version of 114. And then also just earlier today, we were discussing putting capabilities into the CSI driver object for 115. So like when we start we would have to add new fields to the CSI driver object that might change the semantics of how sidecars will behave off of those objects, right? And I think like for this particular case, we can maybe support both, but then in the future, I'm not sure how generic this will be.
Yeah, well, I would draw the line at not removing things that used to work, but I wouldn't add or backport or re-implement new features for older Kubernetes releases. That's where I would say that if you want new features, you need a newer Kubernetes, that's fine. But removing something that used to work, even if it's just an alpha feature, I think that's something that if we can avoid it, we should avoid it. Because people start, even if it's just alpha, people are trying to demonstrate this particular feature. They have, I don't know, a demo deployment where it's enabled. I know that we, for example, do with PMEM CSI. We use both CSI driver info and CSI node info and topology, everything. And now we are kind of stuck on either on a poorly supported release or without support for this feature in 113. So I basically just want to keep it alive until we can safely say that 113 is no longer needed by anyone and we can just stop supporting it ourselves.
So another thing we can do is we can branch these sidecars. We can branch these sidecars before the API changes went in, and we can have two different branches, but we only support the other branch for, you know, one or two more releases.
Yeah, but that's not easier, I think, because then we need to start backporting, and it'll. My personal estimate is that it'll just be more work.
We have to draw. So this kind of ties into, we need to also define a support and deprecation policy for our sidecars. We don't have one right now, and at least these. So for this specific case, these are alpha features, and I don't really want to support alpha features indefinitely. We need to define a line as to how many more releases of these sidecars we're going to support alpha features.
I would say as long as the Kubernetes version, as long as there is a supported Kubernetes version that has those alpha features, we should have support for those. Because it's documented that people can install these Kubernetes versions. The Kubernetes version itself is supported. There were CSI deployments targeting that Kubernetes release, and they are still, by following the same logic, both deployments kind of still need to be supported because people would expect that from a Kubernetes add-on.
That makes sense to me. It brings up further questions. So like one change I was planning on making was to enable topology by default. And
that then also needs to
if we have to support both the alpha and the beta one, then I don't see that being able to happen.
Yeah,
which is
it
fine.
would have to depend. The default would have to be dynamic. So basically, on 114, the default is enabled. On 113 it is as before turned off.
Is it possible to query what version the Kubernetes cluster is?
I think so.
Yes.
Kubelet does it. Kubelet does it. Yeah. So that's actually my part of my proposal. My proposal is that at the first thing that each component does, it queries the Kubernetes version and then decides in which mode and which code it runs. So yeah, we will need such a version check for this to be viable, but I think it's doable.
Okay, that's going to become really complicated.
Are you?
Because the feature, at least we have to like change the whole way that we are currently parsing feature gates.
Yeah, we might have to check how that looks in practice, but I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
So I can give it a try.
I think if we wanted to support this, I mean, okay, for 114, I think the easiest thing to do is to disable topology by default, because I think the work to do Kubernetes version checking along with feature gate flag setting is going to be a lot of work.
If you're fine with that, then I don't mind, but
That's fine by me, I think.
Okay.
How far out are you thinking about making these features available for backwards compatibility? Are you thinking 1.13 on, or at some point we stop supporting it, like after 115 or something like that?
So I think Patrick has a good point. We probably should continue supporting features until Kubernetes deprecates support for them. So once 113 is dropped from Kubernetes support, we also drop it from the sidecars, and we can go ahead and remove all the alpha stuff and also turn on things by default if we want to.
When does that usually happen in Kubernetes land? Is it something? How far back support goes for Kubernetes?
I think it's is it 3 releases? I don't know.
3 releases. Okay.
I think that's right. Am I doing my math? Okay.
14, 15, 16. Yeah, that's right.
So we have to support
well,
it.
in 116 we can remove it.
Oh, we can, or in 117 we can remove it? No.
When 116 comes out, then I think we don't need to support 113 anymore.
13, 14.
Because
Yeah,
we would support 14, 15, and 16 at that time. And 113 would be out of support.
So then the question that comes to mind is, so we have to be really judicious when we introduce an alpha feature, because if whenever code touches the project, then it's stuck, even though it was alpha. So are we not kind of worried about that?
So,
because the whole point of alpha is to proof of concept, for lack of a better term. But if we're going to be stuck with supporting the code what it looks like when it was alpha, then it kind of compounds the debt that we add to the code.
That's a good point. So like, at least, so in this case, topology, alpha and beta behave pretty similarly. So going from alpha to beta is safe, but say in the future, if we have some feature where the beta implementation is completely different from alpha, then that the code might become very complicated to be able to support both.
Right. Okay.
So I guess the question is that, like, in that, so for a scenario like that, then I think branching makes more sense. But
It
I
might.
guess we haven't
It's
seen anything like that yet.
yeah. I'm fine with just making it a case-by-case decision, as long as we are all aware of the intent that we don't just randomly drop support for things that people might have come to expect. That's the important part. And so let's be diligent about it, because it's kind of expected from us, but we are not bound to it by any kind of contract. So we can
Okay.
still.
So the other thing though is, so as part of moving topology to beta, I am changing a lot of behavior in the sidecar, and that's going to break if you were depending on behavior of alpha. I think that's okay, because alpha, we say we don't guarantee any sort of backwards compatibility guarantees. So if you upgrade your sidecar to the newer sidecar, like the alpha CRDs we will still support the alpha CRDs, but the behavior of it might change.
I think that's fine. But then we still need documentation of that change.
Yes.
We need that either way, because then people will see a changed behavior even if they just go to beta without the CRDs. But I think that's fine.
Yes. The other question is, if, say, the Kubernetes version is beta, would someone still want to override it and use the alpha version?
So you mean Kubernetes 1.14 with CRDs?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
That's not possible because Kubernetes don't understand the CRDs.
Well, I'm also thinking not just alpha to beta, but beta to GA. Like when we go beta to GA, we do have to support both.
Yeah. So does Kubernetes. So it will work.
But I guess would we want, right now we're proposing that we enable feature gates based off of the Kubernetes version. Would we actually want the feature gate to be triggered by the user in case they want to override something? Like if, say, topology goes beta or GA in 1.15, and we updated the sidecar to support both the beta and GA versions, would someone still want to run their driver on 1.15 using the beta version of the APIs?
Probably not, because why? If we release the sidecar with GA version of the API,
there might be a deployment that currently still uses the sidecars that are using the beta API.
Yeah, but that's old sidecar. That's okay. That should work.
Okay,
But if somebody uses the new sidecar with the new API, why would somebody force it to beta?
Is there anything where once we create the object, we don't try to create a new one? Or would we always, whenever you upgrade the driver, we destroy all of the objects and create new GA objects? Like, like when we upgrade nodes, right? We're going to have some nodes use the GA objects and some nodes are going to use the beta objects.
I think in etcd there is just one object and you see it as V1 or beta 1. But in etcd it's just one object.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point about version mismatch, and you might also want to consider what happens if you downgrade, but I really don't have a clue how to handle that.
Okay. Okay. So I think the conclusion is no gating on Kubernetes versions for now, because we have a lot of questions to answer about upgrade, downgrade.
So if we release the provisioner, should it use CRDs or entry objects if there is no Kubernetes gate?
Oh, it would have to be an explicit flag.
No,
Okay.
wait a second. I think that's mixing two different things. I would say that switching between CRDs and entry objects, that can depend on the Kubernetes version. I don't see a problem with that. Where we are currently having problems is when we have different versions of objects that are created in the cluster, and those objects have versioning. So for CRD versus entry, these are completely two different completely things that are not conflicting with each other. But a beta version and a GA version of the entry API objects, that might have incompatible changes, or I'm not sure whether that can be the case, but that might have implications.
Okay, I need to think about this if it's going to work for topology. Because I think there's two things going on, right? There's feature gates. We have feature gates that are decoupled from Kate's version. Okay, I need to think about this more.
Yeah, I'll have a look at how that could work. I'll start with doing the version check, doing the different implementations for CRD and entry, and I'll have a look at how that currently or might affect the feature gate mechanism. And then we can discuss it again once we have a bit better understanding.
Okay, so for now, our conclusion is support both alpha and beta APIs. And this is flipped with Kate's version check. And then the feature gate needs to be disabled by default until we can remove the alpha CRDs. And we can remove the alpha CRDs in 1.16.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good. About the topology feature gate, I think that's one of the things that we can reconsider in the future. But now, if we can decide to leave it disabled for now, we are on the safe side, I think.
Yeah, because the main thing is, ideally, when it goes beta, we should enable it by default. But the fact that this feature gate is unrelated to the fact that we are using alpha, the Kubernetes side is alpha or beta, is a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Now that we see the issues with compatible provisioner, what about the branching again?
Well, then someone needs to look at all the differences that have accumulated since then and
Yeah, I
figure out
know.
how to backport, and I think that's substantial.
I know, like maybe it's
You
even less.
made most of those. And the end of the day, the only difference, the only diff ideally would be this API usage and some default values. So I still think we should investigate to do that in
Okay.
code.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of work, we have 3 sidecars that use these CRDs. I will handle external provisioner because I'm doing all the topology stuff, but I think I'm not going to have time to look at these other sidecars. So
I'm not sure that attacher uses any alpha feature.
the attacher uses the CSI node info.
Yeah, I know. Okay, nice.
Yeah, I can take at least cluster driver register. I have an open PR against that anyway.
I can take attacher.
Okay.
But
Should
I would
someone
like to have some example.
someone take a first step at getting the Kubernetes version? Or,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Michelle has a work day today, so she can do that today, and we'll all can continue tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully.
No
If I
pressure.
have time. Yeah, there's a lot of other working on the topology stuff. There were a lot of other issues that I've uncovered and am having to deal with. So
Yeah, just keep us posted. If you don't get around to it today, either Jan and I can coordinate tomorrow and see who comes up with a solution first for this version check, and then we'll just copy that everywhere. And it shouldn't be much. It's just really figuring out what the right client Go version API call is.
all right, that sounds good. Okay. So those are all the miscellaneous topics. I don't think we're gonna have time to really go through 114 status. I don't think we have much remaining there. Does anyone want to bring up anything in particular? All right, then we will call a meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.